Hey folks, Randy Wilburn here. I've got a special episode for you today. It's a bonus episode, and I had a chance to sit down with Michael Peerson, who is the owner of Rendezvous Junction Brewing Company based up in Rogers. And he shares his journey from Walmart to brewery founder. And in between there, he had a near-death experience, which moved me quite a bit when we sat down in the studios to record our interview. And I think after listening to this episode, everybody is going to really feel a certain kind of way. The least of which is because he was so transparent with some of the challenges that he ran into. And then more importantly, his near-death experience should probably be a movie. It is a book because he wrote a book. And that book is entitled Beyond Belief. But he just kind of gives us a real insight into his entrepreneurship journey coming out of corporate America, starting a brewery. And it's the kind of story that I think you'll really enjoy. So given that this episode actually came out on July 4th of 2024, I just hope that for you, this story is as freeing as it was for me to listen to and to record and to interview Michael. So without further ado, after the intro, you will hear my interview with Michael Peerson from the Rendezvous Junction Brewing Company. Cue the music.
It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. I am back in the Furman Garner Performance Studio here at KUAF 91.3 FM on your dial. It is the only public radio station in Northwest Arkansas, and I'm so excited to partner up with these guys. You hear me say that all the time, but I always like to give them a shout out right at the very beginning for just basically sharing their space and platform with me. And as always, you know that you can hear the latest episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas on Ozarks at Large every Tuesday, typically. And then every now and then, based on scheduling, it might be on a Wednesday or maybe it's even on a Thursday. It just totally depends on what the folks here at KUF need. But I just appreciate them sharing my platform with their platform. So it works out perfectly. But listen, I've got a great guest today. And at the time of recording this, we are about a week and a half post the terrible tornado event that we had in Northwest Arkansas. I'm recording this on the 4th of June, 2024. And I'm sitting here with Michael Peerson, who is the founder of Rendezvous Junction Brewing Company. He is a former Walmart employee as well as an author. He wrote a book called Beyond Belief, and he shared this book with me before I went on vacation. I had a chance. I haven't read it all, but I had a chance to dive into it. And if you've ever wondered what the afterlife is like, or if you've ever wondered what, if you've heard stories about people that have died and come back to life or have had an outer body experience, well, that Michael would certainly be one of those individuals. But the book's title is Beyond Belief: Revelations from Death Shadows. And certainly with an event like what we just recently experienced here in Northwest Arkansas, even though I wasn't physically here, I had so many friends that have really been challenged by the damage caused by the tornado and all the destruction here in Northwest Arkansas. So our hearts here at the podcast always go out to those folks that are dealing with it the hardest. And certainly anybody that's listening to this that has suffered in any way, shape, or form, if the podcast can help you out, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know how I can serve you, and we'll figure out what we can do. But in the meantime, I want to share this great episode today because I think Michael has a story that's going to really be beneficial for all of us Northwest Arkansans. And so without further ado, Michael Peerson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good, good. It's so good to have you. Listen, I'd love for you just to kind of share a little bit of your superhero origin story with our audience so that they get a better idea of who Michael Peerson is. We'll get into the book. We can start, obviously, talk about Rendezvous Junction, and you don't have to go back to the cradle, but you can kind of go back to, how you got to where you are today.
Of course. I grew up in small town Oklahoma, Holdenville, and I chose to go to pharmacy school. Was educated at Southwestern Oklahoma State University, and met my wife, forever wife, at the young age of 19. We got married, and while I was in pharmacy school, graduated from Southwestern Oklahoma State and began a practice of pharmacy in East Texas. We lived there for 7 years. Walmart was really where I began all my career story. And we moved from there. Walmart promoted me to move to Seattle, Washington, to lead a market up in Washington State and Alaska.
So when you're doing that, then you were not necessarily filling prescriptions at that point.
That's
you
right.
You were overseeing multiple sites that were filling prescriptions.
Yeah, that's right, Randy. Okay. I practiced for 7 years, had my own pharmacy, and then Walmart promoted me to kind of go to the Pacific Northwest, where Walmart was really new up there.
Yeah.
And they wanted someone that had been around a bit that could grow the culture.
Okay.
And so from there, we lived out there a couple years. I got introduced to craft beer, by the way, long before it was popular out there in the Pacific Northwest. Breweries like Deschutes River Brewing and Widmer and a number of others. I fell in love with craft beer at that point. But, Walmart tugged me back to Northwest Arkansas at that point, promoted me to regional, where I'm overseeing large geographies across the U.S. And I got to do a lot of fantastic things with a really big company after that. 31 years with Walmart before we did anything in the brewing space.
Wow. Okay. And I can only imagine, and I've talked to others that have worked at Walmart, is that there is something about being proven in that environment that gives you the ability to kind of step out and, do your own thing, or, be at least feel equipped and say, hey, if I could do it within the confines of this organization, I can certainly do it out in the world on my own. Right.
Yeah.
And I got to think that, Mr. Sam is smiling down in terms of that aspect of Walmart, because, it's one thing to be a company man or woman and to work at Walmart. And there's a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are a lot of people that have been at Walmart for a season and then either aged out or decided that, I'm going to move out and try something on my own, just like what you did, and have found success. And a lot of that success can be drawn back to their time and experience at Walmart. Because I think Walmart prepares people for a high level and a high degree of success.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I'm small town Oklahoma pharmacist, and I got to lead talent acquisitions for the world's largest company.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen anywhere else,
right?
Except in a company like Walmart, where they're like, he's got a skill set that we could use actually acquiring talent for our company in other areas besides, the healthcare segment.
Yeah.
So, and I got to run large operations, multi-million-dollar, businesses, and get exposure to some incredible leaders and talent, both in and outside the company. It's, I look back on my 31 plus years with the company with, the fact that it's a company that developed me, grew me, invested in me, and gave me the opportunity to do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, listen, I've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast. I'm sure the listeners don't want to hear it again. I've read Mr. Sam's biography a couple of times. I also have it on Audible, and I've listened to it. And I've always said it would be great to hear it read in his voice, right? And now that we have AI, that's a possibility. So I'm hoping for the day that we can hear Sam Walton's biography in his voice. I think that would be cool. But the stories that you hear, and I've met some friends of Sam and what they've told me about being around him, and I'm just like, wow. And I just had a chance to meet Jim Walton and Alice Walton recently and Alice on 2 occasions. And it was just really, I told them my experience, and just what little bit I know about it. Because I came from the Northeast, and Walmart's everywhere, but when you think of Walmart, you don't think of it the same way until like you come here and you see what Walmart represents in Northwest Arkansas. And then you go elsewhere and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So, but anyway, it is great. And I think when I talk to people about Northwest Arkansas, about why coming here, one of the main reasons that I tell people why you should come here, even if you're not going to work at Walmart, is that we have a solid foundation built. To me, Walmart represents an oak tree that is firmly planted. It's not going anywhere. They're just about to build this huge facility. They're almost done with it. And I mean, they have basically put a flag in the ground and said, this is where we're going to be. And I mean, clearly, I don't think Sam realized what Northwest Arkansas would ultimately become, but they are a part of that.
Of course.
And what it is today. And so I tell people all the time, hey, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and understand that there is a lot of opportunity right here in Northwest Arkansas because of that. So, but that's neither here nor there. The other aspect of Northwest Arkansas that I say is great, and I always say that this is really fertile soil, is because this is a great hotbed of entrepreneurship and opportunity as far as that's concerned. And you found opportunity by deciding to start a brewery, right? So you said that you got a little bit of experience up in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm assuming that experience was more as a customer than anything else.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but at what point in your mind were you like, listen, I could be a micro brewer? Because I got to be honest with you, and I've mentioned this before because I've had the folks from Ozarks Beer Company on.
Oh, yeah.
And they're amazing.
Yes, they are.
And, and I was telling her that, hey, I tried my hand. I got one of those portable home brewing kits back in the early 90s. I failed miserably. I made some concoction that was kind of a halfway between a cider, kombucha, and some really nasty beer. And so after one attempt, I stopped. For you made you say, hey, you know what? This is something I'm going to try to do. And what was your earliest experience like?
Well, it goes back to I've got two daughters. My youngest daughter married a young man named Levi. And Levi and I decided to go on a father-in-law, son-in-law bonding trip. We took a hike to Colorado and we decided to do an extreme hike. It's called the 4-Pass Loop around the Maroon Bells. Oh, wow. And it's an intense hike. It was 3 nights, 4 days.
That sounds like a hike that some people don't finish.
Yeah. And we were regretting it on that last little bit. But, you cross 4 mountain passes. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And got backpacks and roughing it, if you will. And when we got finished, I took him to a craft brewery to celebrate. We went to New Belgium. He had never been exposed to craft beer, and I just wanted to share that experience with him a bit. We did a tour and then sit in the tap room afterwards, and we were just talking, and he said, man, it'd be great to do this for a living.
Yeah.
I said, well, you got to start in the garage first. So we, chatted a bit on the ride back, and as soon as we got back that weekend, we went to the craft beer homebrew store and bought a couple of kit brews like you and made a couple of beers, and they turned out great,
Really?
but it was too easy. And so what we did was immediately started diving in, making our own recipes and, the science, the microbiology and the chemistry and my background comes a little easier to me than most. And so I had that figured out. It was more about the craft side of it and just playing around with it and practicing over and over and over and over again.
Experimentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so after a while, we were making more beer than we could possibly consume. And so I started inviting friends and family over to enjoy it. And before you know it, it wasn't unusual for me on a weekend to have 130 people at the house trying and sampling 18 different beers on tap, free, of course, just for feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
what did your neighbors think?
Oh, man, they loved it.
They were there too.
Yeah, they were coaching me on how to fine tune my red or whatever.
Right.
So it became more of a push us into the industry because all of those friends, family, and extended friends kept saying, Mike, you should do this for a living. You should, make your beer commercially so we can buy it.
Right.
I'd buy it.
Right. And then at what point did you decide that you were going to birth Rendezvous? And how did that come about? It
was actually a little more by accident. I was helping a friend who was dealing with some challenging issues around talent in his restaurant. And next door to his restaurant, he had a a brewery, and his brewer happened to be leaving. And so just coincidentally, he knew that I was a home brewer and said, hey, you want to take a crack at doing it commercially here? So it was kind of a low capital entry for me to be able to get in there and just see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And so my son-in-law and I kind of partnered together and kicked it off there, did our first beer there, and turned out wonderful. And we just got the hang of it. So that was in October of 2016. And it's just, we've never looked back since.
Really? So not long after that, Rendezvous was born. Were you calling the beer Rendezvous at the time?
Yeah, we were.
Okay, you were. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the significance of that?
Yeah, so it began back in the early days of Rogers, when, as I understand the story and the stories I've read, is that there were a group of settlers in the area that all had kind of come together and decided they wanted to start an apple orchard.
Okay.
So they ordered a trainload of apples and rendezvoused at a junction in downtown Rogers, eagerly waiting this trainload of apples. And so that's kind of where it come from.
Okay.
I mean, the story didn't use rendezvous,
I know, I got you.
The point is that it's about people coming together for a common purpose, a cause, and then having arrived eagerly waiting on that purpose to come to life.
Yeah.
And so all of the brand Rendezvous Junction, our mission of crafting beer that brings taste and buds together, our beer names all have to do with what happens or what can happen and the circumstances around people coming together. So Shindig, Lollygagger, Just Jammin', these beer names are born after this idea of what can happen when people come together.
Sure. I love that. And, I was telling you that I had a chance to visit your location about a month ago at the time of recording this. And I was blown away. I was like, oh, this is so nice. And so for people that if you're new to the area, you don't even live here, Rogers has a mall, Pinnacle Hills Mall,
That's right.
I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the coolest, it's like an outdoor mall right in Rogers, and it's not in the downtown area. It's just off of our main highway, I-49. For those of you that live here, you're like, Randy, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
We all know where a Pinnacle Hills Mall is. But when I first moved here in 2014, behind Pinnacle Hills Mall, there was nothing. Now there is a whole strip of businesses and restaurants and Rendezvous Junction, and soon to be a professional sports team.
That's
the
right.
USL Arkansas soccer team is going to be housed over there. They're building a facility. There's going to be a brand new stadium. So, I mean, timing for you couldn't have been more impeccable as far as that's concerned. But you decided, I guess the easiest way to describe it is that facility that you're in now, were you someplace else before then?
Yeah, we were just up the road to the north in a restaurant there. It used to be called Foster's Pint and Plate.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I remember that.
And the owner of the property we're in now, Alex Blass, he owns the Bellevue Urban Center there. And he had reached out to me and said, man, we'd love to have you guys in here in our building.
Sure.
So we worked out a deal. And you're right. I mean, I kind of fell into that one as well. Alex is a great partner, but he had this warehouse space in the back of this nice building. And we were able to kind of go in there. It's a 6,000 square foot building, 38-foot ceilings. And we kind of gave it an industrial steampunk look and feel after the locomotive branding and all of that to kind of bring out our theme. And
I love the multiple levels too. I mean, it's really nice. I guess you can hold events there as well. So there's plenty of space for people to come check it out, not just to come have a pint, but also just to use it for other purposes. You know?
We have events on a regular basis. People want a private space so they can go up on the mezzanine, and it houses about anywhere from 75 to 100 people up there, and they can we've had Bible study groups up there to big corporate presentations.
Yeah. Shoot, maybe I should come up there and record a podcast. So
yeah.
that would be cool. So, okay. So now you have this brewing company, you have a 6,000 square foot operation. You're brewing beer. How many different types of beer are you brewing?
Well, just this week, we just released our 100th unique beer.
Okay.
So one of the things that we set out to do was have a variety of beers that anybody with any palate could come in and find something that they would enjoy.
Yeah.
From the light lagers to the darks to the pale ales and IPAs, all the way to the sours and, the real funky beers.
Sure.
So we keep 23 beers on tap. Really unusual for a craft brewery to carry that many, but we like creating something new. And so every 2 weeks we're releasing something new and, just getting feedback from our customer on that. We might use a pilot batch called our Sidetrack series where we invent on that system.
Sure.
Get feedback from our customers. We've got a core group of customers, our members, called our taste buds.
Yeah.
And so our taste buds give us very candid feedback on those beers. And then we might take a beer and scale it to a larger scale for more widespread distribution and, production.
I love that name, Taste Buds. That's cool. That's very cool. So are you canning or bottling your beer?
We're canning.
Okay.
Canning's more sustainable. It's infinitely sustainable. And so it's the best way to, produce and package beer for take home, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And so we can, but we don't distribute our cans. You have to pick it up at Rendezvous.
Oh, so you're not available in any other stores?
No.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Okay. How is that working out for you?
It's great.
Okay.
Our dream, our vision was to be a place where people come together, hang out, about community and, relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's the objective. We don't desire to run a large packaging brewery where that's what we do is just package over. We want to create new products and, enjoy it with friends, and hang out.
So in case somebody who's listening to this right now at this moment and just like, I have a real taste for some craft beer, give us the address for Rendezvous Junction.
Yeah, it's 2225 South Bellevue Road in Rogers.
Yeah, and it's right behind the Pinnacle Hills Mall. You can't miss it. So
right across from like Dave and Buster's.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's in a perfect location. And we'll mention that address again later in the episode. But so Michael, I want to, because when you and I spoke, I was really moved by just the little that you shared with me. And I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes we as human beings, we don't always realize the fragility of life. And I think that your experience, and I'd love for you maybe just to kind of just share why you decided that, you are a pharmacist, very successful pharmacist, talent acquisition, high level at Walmart, decides to step out and become an entrepreneur. But then you were like, you know what? I love having all of those different titles, but I'm going to add one more title to my resume, and that's an author. And that actually didn't come by happenstance, because I think if I read, that was never in the plans.
Correct.
You just had something that was really burdened on your heart and experience. And I'd love for you just to kind of share a little bit about that, because I think, and I was just reminded, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, and this is just perfectly transparency, folks, for you guys, is that lately I have experienced a number of tragedies, not in my own personal family, but just people close enough to me to where I recognize the fragility of life. And I think we all are there from time to time, and some of us deal with it, and we all grieve differently. And I can't tell you how you should grieve versus how I grieve or how I feel about things. But it's even one of the reasons why on my watch, if you see here, I have Memento Mori on here to remember death.
Yeah.
Because it's coming for all of us.
That's right.
Death is batting 1,000, and we're all going to see that at one point in time. I just don't want to see it right away. And I want to do thousands of more podcast episodes before I die. So I'm just putting that out there, God, just so you hear me and know the cry of my heart. But because I have so many great listeners, and I know y'all want to hear me for the next 20 or 30 years. So we'll see how that works out and if that's in the plans. But seriously, though, I think sometimes we need to be reminded of how fragile life is. And sometimes we go through experiences where we're reminded of why we need to sometimes slow down and take in all the things that are around us instead of trying to rush from one experience to the next.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you just to share, and I hope I set you up properly for that. I'd love for you just to share a little bit about your background, specifically as it pertains to this book, and why you decided to write the book.
Well, I would begin by saying that I didn't decide. I was instructed that I would tell this story. So
I like that.
I never had a desire to be an author. But when you go through what I've been through, and I'm just being obedient in telling my story. I've been a believer. I've been a faithful Christian since a young teenager, and but I would just say that my walk was more along the lines that I checked the boxes. I got my pen, I got baptized, and I'm good to go.
Right.
And I had nudges from God to share my testimony, but in the corporate world, it just was never really appropriate, or I didn't feel that it was, certainly. And so I'm driving home one day after having a long day at Walmart. I've spent a good amount of time in the brewery because I'm doing Walmart and brewery nights and evenings and weekends. And then I'm driving home, and I had a moment where I was called out that, Mike, you're this supposed expert on relationships, and that it's a two-way street. And I've been blessing you your entire life, and what are you doing for me?
Yeah.
I was convicted, and I had to pull over because I couldn't see to drive. And you would think a moment like that would change you, and you would change your behavior, and you would start telling people about your faith. Well, I let the busyness of life just continue. And about 9 months after that moment, I was in a UTV accident.
Okay.
And was trying to help a neighbor out who had a fire behind his place, and I jumped into a UTV to go help. And I shouldn't have been back there, but nonetheless, I rolled the UTV. It was a devastating rollover and down an enormous embankment, and I ended up in the back seat with a broken back. And so I was meta-flighted from that location to Washington Regional, where I awaited surgery. They were afraid that I would be paralyzed if we didn't get right on the surgery. But for 2 days, I had to wait to let the swelling go down, and they strapped me down so that I didn't move.
Mm-hmm.
Go into surgery, and when they roll me over for surgery, I throw a massive pulmonary embolism. It was 13.75 inches long and the size of your index finger.
Wow.
And comes out of my leg, goes through my heart into my lungs, and I died right there on the table. And there was a multitude of miracles that took place, Randy. There was a cardiac thoracic surgeon that just happened to be in the operating room right next door and was available because I had seconds. I didn't have minutes or hours. I had seconds. And he was prepped for surgery. I was prepped for surgery. Just roll me back over, and I have open heart right there. And so I had a vision when I went through that. Not just a vision, I had an experience. I'm not doing it justice by calling it a vision because it happened.
Yeah.
And so I go through this, and I come out the other side, and I wake up, and I'm in ICU, and there's a surgeon in my room who wasn't the back surgeon, who's telling me, he's asking me, do you know what happened?
Yeah.
And I just said, I know I died. He's like, well, how did you know you died? And I told him my story and the experience that I had. And he breaks on me. He's like, Mike, you just can't imagine what just happened because, I didn't save you. God saved you. I just happened to be who he used in the process. And so you're right. Life is fragile. You never know. I mean, one day I'm, hanging out on the lake and kicking back and listening to music and having a nice beer. And the next day I've died.
Yeah.
And it came from nowhere. 18 months after I recovered from that, I got COVID. And I went on the ventilator. And I was 74 days on the vent. And there were 3 different occasions in which the doctors called the family and said, you guys need to get in. He's not going to make it.
Yeah.
You say your goodbyes. And, each time I came through that, and it wasn't for anything but the power of prayer and faith and trust and, and all the things that are in my book, Beyond Belief, is that I was a believer. But the nudges that I've been getting and the message behind the book and the instruction that I received is that it's centered on James 2:19, the verse that says, you believe there is one God. Good for you. Even the demons believe and tremble. And so that was me, my life. I believed. I checked all the boxes. I was good to go. And then I had these experiences, and it was like he didn't have to. God chose to demonstrate his miracles. They're around us every day. We just don't see them. We don't look for them. But he chose to intervene and get my attention because he wanted me to tell my story. And so I think the brewery is a great platform for me to be able to tell that story over a beer, you know, and so it's not something I sought out to do, Randy. It's something that, you know, was just was one of those things that you don't go through that without being obedient to instruction and following through on it. So I tell that story any chance I get.
I love it. I mean, we call those divine appointments, right? You don't make that appointment. Somebody else makes that appointment for you. I do want to back up for 2 seconds because, you know, just kind of hearing you share what you shared, do you have any recollection at all of from the last time you remember consciousness to when you came to? Do you remember what it was like after?
When I say
after you fell out of consciousness and you were technically dead.
Yeah. So,
I mean, you didn't see Morgan Freeman, right? I mean, that's just a joke.
No. It's so I'm tumbling through what I describe as a wormhole in space.
Wow.
Okay? It is a winding up and down, and I'm flying at incredible rates of speed. And I'm very focused on just trying to get my balance.
Yeah.
The tunnel is lit. I don't know the source of the light, but I can see through it, and I can see ahead of me as I'm tumbling through it. But beyond that wormhole, if you will, is just total darkness. It's black pitch. And so I'm afraid that I'm going to get flung into this blackness. As I'm winding through this, though, there's this kind of an infinite arc of like life-size video clips coming at me, one after another, after another, after another. And it's not pictures, it's video where I've got audio and imagery. And I don't remember one scene from the next because they were flying by me so fast. And the sounds where I could hear the one behind me, the one in front of me, and the next one coming. And so it was just a jumbled mess of noise. And meanwhile, I'm still focused on trying to stay upright and get through this. And I remember thinking, am I going to be doing this forever? It wasn't days, you know, or hours or days, but it was weeks, months, years. It was like time had a whole different element to it. And I recall, even though the likelihood is that we're talking about minutes, it seemed as if eternity.
Sure.
And I remember thinking, I'm just going to be this way forever. And then eventually everything came to a stop. And all of those sounds from those videos all converged to a flat line, just a beep. And I'm standing on a white gravel road looking at a white gate. And I know I've died. I'm no longer scared. Now I'm at peace with the reality that I've died. And I can hear voices on the other side of the gate. And, you know, I couldn't understand the words. I don't know if it was the flat line just drowning out the words, or if maybe they were speaking it. Maybe I wasn't supposed to know the words, but it didn't matter because what they were contemplating had came into me. It was like I knew that they were deciding that, are we going to let this guy in through the gate to see his Savior and those that have gone before him, or are we sending him back home? It wasn't heaven or hell thing for me. It was, we're letting him in or we're sending him home. And I just stand there for 3, 4, 5 minutes. And while all those sounds, the flat line and the voices seem to be outside of me, I get a voice that comes inside of me. And the voice said, he has more work to do. And so I turn from the gate and I'm traveling down this Y on the gravel road, and the video that I start to see is blurry. I can't quite make out what's going on. There's clanging sounds, and I'm pretty sure it was just the noisy recovery room. And there's this shadowy figure that comes down in front of me. He's pretty sure it was the anesthesiologist. And he says, you're one lucky man. God must have more work for you to do.
Wow. So how long physically were you clinically dead?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do believe that it was in the realm of minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. They pivoted to the pulmonary embolism team quickly. And all the right people were in the right place at the right time. It was like perfection. And so that was
God's timing is perfect.
It is.
It really is.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, oh my gosh. I don't know, folks. If you saw me, you'd recognize I have goosebumps hearing this story. I mean, Michael is being as transparent as he can be. And I think it's important for us to recognize that, so many people have had this experience.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate the fact that you were obedient to what the Lord laid on your heart to share this story, right? Because I think, again, it's a reminder. It can be informing, but what has the book really done for you since writing the book?
Well, I would say it was healing in many respects. It's difficult for me to go back and read it because there's, I'm comfortable telling my version of the story, but my wife and my daughters and the family, I'm gonna get choked up on you. When I have to tell their story, it kills me as a father and a husband that my family went through something of my doing, you know, and so that's tough. But when I get through that, I want people to know. I believe there are a lot of people like me that believe in God. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to undermine my experience as a young teenager accepting Jesus into my heart as my Lord and Savior. However, my walk wasn't with him. And through the Holy Spirit kept nudging me over and over and over again. And I just was too busy.
Yeah.
And so telling this story is important because that Bible verse was not something I went and searched out as the source for my book. I was given that Bible verse.
Yeah.
And that mere belief is just knocking on the door, that he desires a relationship with us, a two-way street.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about relationships, I've benefited from having a mentor that, actually owns patents on relationships in my Walmart years. And relationships are often thought of as warm and fuzzy and kind of kumbaya, particularly in the workspace.
Sure.
But I'm here to tell you that they're very powerful.
They are.
For the good and also for the bad, right? And if they go wrong, they can be really bad. But done well and they're very durable, some incredible things can come from that. But it requires two parties, both attracted to the other for whatever reason they're entering into the relationship. And it requires both parties investing in order to get something out of it.
Yeah.
And so I was on the take in my relationship with Jesus.
Ooh.
He was blessing me and I wasn't giving back. And he was calling me out. And so I got to experience these things. People ask me today, Mike, do you regret? I'm sorry you had to go through that. Your voice is not the same anymore. I've got a trach in my hole in my throat. I've got all these. I can't do the things I used to do, and I wouldn't trade for these experiences.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to be healthy. I'd like to be stronger. I'd like to be able to I'd like to go on that hike again. Mm-hmm. There's no way I could do that today, but I wouldn't trade for my experiences. I wished everyone could experience what I've experienced without having gone through it. Right. And so my takeaway back to your question is more about maybe, just maybe, my story might touch one person and it might change their direction because life is fragile.
It is.
I have write about my cousin who we lost. He was brushing his teeth and just fell over. And we had no leading indication that he, was going to go into a heart arrhythmia that was going to take his life, and he's gone. And then I found myself and my family wondering, well, where is Scotty? Where is he today? And where is he? Where was his faith? And I regret not having my conversations with him to tell him where I was, to get a feel for where he is, because it's one thing about dying. We're all going to die, as you said earlier, but those that are left grieving because someone died can grieve much easier knowing where they are.
Yeah.
And so hopefully my story touches one life. And if it touches one life, it's been worth it. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'm at today. And, I've gotten just this week, I got a phone call from Jerusalem.
Wow.
Somebody on a cruise had been reading my book and they're already handing it or recommending it to other people around the world. And it's already having an impact in individual lives just from my story. And so I believe that that's an element of the work I have to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's me now reciprocating this relationship and being accountable and obedient by, sharing my faith and, my story with others.
Yeah. Well, listen, there is a scripture in the Bible in Revelations that says we're overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I tell people all the time, even in just normal settings, that what you go through and what you experience can be freeing for other people, but you have to be willing to share it. And I know too often in the world, we sometimes run the risk or are afraid of opening ourselves up for fear of rejection, right? That's just a common concept. And it's the idea that if God takes you through something, and I'm not preaching here, I'm just talking in general, if you experience some major life challenges that you're able to overcome, you need to be willing to shout that from the rooftops, because there's other people that are behind you that are going through the same exact thing.
That's exactly right.
And I don't know who that's for, but that's for somebody that's listening to this that needs to hear that reminder today. Be willing to be transparent, be willing to share your story, even if it's just with one other person, because like Michael said, if you can change one person's life, you can change the trajectory of them and their families for generations to come.
Absolutely.
And that's huge as far as I'm concerned. So, man, I could go on and on with you, Michael, on this. This is really rich. And I'm even sitting here with a slight tear in my eye, folks, because, those of you that know me know I'm a very emotional person. And I'm a man's man, but I'm as emotional as they come. And I recognize, again, just because of, lately, a couple of the things, I'm being reminded of the fragility of life. And I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to bring Michael on to this podcast, because, I don't want to just talk about business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life. This is life. Yeah. And this is what we're talking about here, right? And so it's not always going to be about the next best thing, although Rendezvous Junction Brewing Company is one of the next best things when it comes to microbreweries here in Northwest Arkansas. And we're certainly honored to be able to highlight them and what they're doing here, but more importantly, able to highlight Michael's story, because other people need to hear it. And I certainly recommend that you get the book and pick it up. I picked up the Kindle version like literally after I spoke to Michael on the phone. And again, that book is Beyond Belief, Revelations from Death's Shadow by Michael Peerson. You can get that on Amazon, just about every major platform, and even some local bookstores, I would imagine. So, or no, because you self-publish.
Yeah, self-publish. Yeah, so it's mostly,
kind of on demand.
Yeah, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Amazon.
I would expect it to be in Walmart. So, that's awesome. So, okay. Well, very cool. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on today and just kind of sharing your story. Is there anything else that you want to leave with us before we close out this podcast?
I think I would leave with this, that relationships matter.
Yeah.
That life is too short, and that there are choices that we make throughout our journey, and those choices are crucial.
Yeah.
Particularly as it comes to relationships, the you and I, as well as the relationship with the ultimate.
Absolutely.
And so if there are any of your listeners that would like to hear more of the story, perhaps maybe they want to have a more in-depth conversation, maybe goes beyond what I put in the book, love to have a beer over that conversation at Rendezvous. And I think that our lives are centered around serving one another.
Yeah.
Helping one another.
Yeah.
And offering experiences that we can each take away and make a difference for somebody else. And I'd like to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, amen to that, man. So for anybody that wants to join you for that beer, give us the address again for Rendezvous.
Sure thing. 2225 South Bellevue Road.
Okay.
Rogers, Arkansas.
Yeah, you can't miss it, folks. Again, like I said, it's right behind the Dave & Buster's and the parking lot there at Pinnacle Hills Mall. I certainly recommend that you come check it out. It's a beautiful facility. They've got a lot of flat screen TVs, just a beautiful bar set up as well. And so I definitely, if you go up there, please mention that you heard about the place from I Am Northwest Arkansas, and then we can go from there. But I just support this local business, and more importantly, connect with Michael because he's got an amazing story that is what we like to say is a freeing story, if you will. And so I certainly want to encourage you to do that. But Michael, thank you for joining us here on the podcast today. We really, really appreciate you, and just continue doing what you're doing and making amazing beer and telling an amazing story, because the world needs to continue to hear that. We need hope more than ever. At this point in time, I don't care, politics and all this other stuff aside, we need hope in this world. And because without it, we are a lost cause. And so your story provides hope for sure, more than anything else. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode and get all of Michael's contact information, as well as a link to order his book, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Sign up today. You can also subscribe or follow the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, and I just want to put a disclaimer out there. It's not a disclaimer, but we are also on YouTube, and we are starting to build a following on YouTube, and we want to grow. And actually, as of the time of recording this, we have a goal to get 1,000 people subscribed to our YouTube channel at I Am Northwest Arkansas. So we'll put that on the show notes link as well. But we would love for you just to take a minute to subscribe. We've actually got some amazing videos up there, and I'm going to be recording more videos on a weekly basis that will be posted as YouTube shorts, as general videos, and then several of the podcast episodes that we do, while I typically do audio first, will be audio and video. So I would just encourage you there's going to be a lot more coming down the pipeline from I Am Northwest Arkansas in video format, and we would love your support. So if you're on YouTube like I am, I'd love for you just to take a moment and click that subscribe button for I Am Northwest Arkansas. We would really, really appreciate it. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we will see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.
Hi, it's Randy Wilburn from I Am Northwest Arkansas. Are you looking to learn new skills or to explore a new industry? The Northwest Arkansas Council can connect you with incredible training programs to help you grow. Whether you're interested in a new trade or looking to upskill, they've got you covered. Explore the possibilities at careersnwa.com. That's careersnwa.com, where your next opportunity is waiting for you. Take control of your future today.